My wife's servanthood was off the charts that day. It was preparation for a small group which was going to launch in our home, and she just wanted everything to be right. She was working hard. She had vacuumed the carpet, and she had steam cleaned the hardwood floors and dusted everything, and then she cleaned bathrooms and washed tiles, and then she was in the kitchen. Not only did she prepare the food, she was in the process of making it and just working hard, and it was tiring just to watch her. And then at one point, I went out to her, and I grabbed her by the shoulders. And you know what? For all the married guys in the room, I'm going to give you a gift here in a moment. For all the young guys who wish to be married one day, just remember this moment. I grabbed her by the shoulders, and I said, listen, I said, you are out-serving me right now. Stop it. And she got this big grin on her face, which told me I may have earned a few points there. You know what that feels like? And I was like, he shoots, he scores, yeah. And so it was this great moment where I acknowledged how hard she was serving. Today is going to be a servant story. Jesus is going to wash the feet of his disciples. This is meant to be a contrast to what's going on in the upper room. Just real quick, we're not told in the Gospel of John, but we're told in the other accounts that after the dinner and after communion, the Lord's Supper, the disciples started arguing with one another over which one of them was greater. Is that just bizarro? That in the upper room, they're still not feeling the weight of that moment. They're not feeling the hours before the arrest, the hours before the cross. They're really emotionally and intellectually unplugged. And in that moment, being in the presence of Jesus, the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, they're arguing over which one of them is the greatest. So to be a contrast to that moment, Jesus gets up and he washes their feet. Now, just some quick background. Let's just talk about foot washing for a moment. Remember, we're in the first century. Remember that everyone back then wore sandals or went barefooted. Remember, they walked long distances. Remember that it was on trails and roads that they shared with animals. Do you get the picture here? Those feet were nasty. And then they'd come into a house and they would recline at a table. You need to imagine a very low table where they would lay to sharing the meal, kind of on their side and their feet off behind them, and they couldn't hide those feet. And also know this, that in the old homes back then, this was customary. Don't go looking in the Old Testament for some law. There was no law about foot washing. It was just a custom. It was refreshing. It was a courtesy. To not wash someone's feet was rude when they came into your house. And in every situation, houses would have a basin and some water and a towel sitting there. And catch this, it would be the job of the lowest servant in the home, the lowest servant that had no title, the servant that had no prestige. It'd be their job. But because we're in the upper room and it's just Jesus and the disciples, the whole world has been locked out of this moment. This is just Jesus with his followers here. There's no servant in the room. And if you followed a rabbi, if you were a disciple of a rabbi back then, you were responsible for serving the rabbi, but the rabbi never served you. Because he was the teacher, the master, he was never responsible for serving you. You would serve him. But in this custom, the one thing that no disciple was ever asked to do was to serve by doing foot washing. That was even below them. So you get the picture here that Jesus is about to serve by doing something the lowest servant in the whole wide world would be responsible for doing, and it's going to shock the disciples. Also remember, as we're reading through this, Judas is also there, and Jesus will wash the feet of his betrayer. And if that doesn't make you wag your head and go, Jesus, what were you doing? That one moment will. This is important to the church. It's important to our fellowship of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus is going to ask the same of us. Not a foot washing ceremony, but to have a heart of service like that. We're going to start in John chapter 13. Open up your Bibles to that. Verse 3 is where I'm going to begin. Jesus, knowing that the Father had put all things under his power, that means he had all authority, and that he had come from God and he was going to return to God, So he got up from the meal, he took off his outer clothing, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and after that he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around them. I love that this whole thing started with that he had all authority, all power. If you had suddenly all authority, all power, would you use that to serve someone else, washing the feet of your betrayer? Probably not. I know I wouldn't. If all of a sudden I had all authority and all power, I'd surround myself with people to serve me. And the last thing I'd probably be thinking is of serving someone else. This is what in the Old Testament, in Isaiah 53, we were told he would be the suffering servant. The Messiah would be. So we're looking for a servant as we're looking for the Messiah. Verse 6, Jesus came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later on you will understand. Well, no, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you will have no part of me. You know, if Jesus tells you, you don't get this right now, that's a good time to just go quiet, right? Not Peter. Look at verse 9. Then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my heads and my head too. My hands, my head as well. All right. This is where Peter thinks he knows better than Jesus. And you know what? If you got to wash my feet, man, just wash all of me. Now, he just protested that Jesus was going to wash his feet. You shouldn't be washing my feet. But Jesus, this is just so curious to me. This is a trap that a lot of good Christian people fall into. I'm okay with you serving me, Jesus, but you have to serve me on my terms. When we pray sometimes, this is what I want. I want you to do this for me. And if God doesn't do it just the way you asked for it to be done, there are people who walked away from God, who shook their fist at God and said, that's it, I'm done. You didn't serve me on my terms. When God might have something much bigger and behind the scenes he's trying to get accomplished. Peter has that kind of attitude. If you're going to serve me, you know, if you're determined to serve, then you're going to serve me the way I want. Wash all of me. Now this next part is a little deeper thought for those who like deeper study here. Verse 10, Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though, not every one of you. For Jesus knew who was going to betray him, and that is why he said, not every one of you is clean. All right. This is really cryptic. Just real quick, you can do a study later if you want to go deeper. This is the difference between justification and sanctification. Those are big church words. Justification is what happens when you've committed your life to being a follower of Jesus Christ. You are immediately justified with God. You and God are right. You're good. However, sanctification is something, how long does it take to sanctify somebody to where they don't sin anymore? That takes a long time. In fact, I'm not convinced we ever reach that while we're here on this earth. While we walk this earth, we're going to get dirty. Our feet are going to get dirty. That's very symbolic of just us being in a sinful world. We're going to sin. You're going to sin. I'm going to sin. Sanctification takes a long time. So Jesus is making this difference, that the bath is justification. You're clean. You're good with God. But sanctification, getting rid of all the sin in your life, that takes a much longer time. Do you understand why that was a little bit cryptic? It's not the point of the passage, though, and it's not where Jesus wants us to go. Here's where Jesus is taking us, verse 12. When Jesus had finished washing their feet, he put on clothes. He returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, rightfully so. That is what I am. And now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should wash one another's feet. I have set for you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master. That means if our master washed feet, we're not greater than him. We should wash feet. Nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. I do not believe Jesus is initiating some foot washing ceremony for the church. When you get into the book of Acts and you see the early church, not one time do you ever see a foot washing ceremony. That's not what he's doing. Jesus is calling his followers to have a servant's heart, to serve other people. And I love how he did this. I almost took this whole sermon in this direction. Jesus touches before he teaches. I love that thought. It's often what we talk about when we talk about Jesus. Jesus opens with grace, but then he closes with truth. We live in a world that is so broken, and we want to just throw a lot of biblical truth at them. And before you can really lay heavy biblical truth on someone's life, you have to have a friendship, a relationship with them. You have to have moments where you touch their lives first and then you teach. And sometimes we get that reversed, and that's how we come across as angry Christians. And it's just a thought inside this passage. But the more I studied it, the more I realized that's not where God is taking us. Why serving by washing feet, and why washing his betrayer's feet? Can anybody even do that? Can anybody serve their betrayer? Think about that for a moment. This is the moment where we just go, I don't think I could ever do that. Somebody who deeply hurt me, someone who betrayed me. And yet I know people, even in this congregation, who have done just that. People who were horribly betrayed by a friend or somebody they worked with, or by a family member or by a spouse, and they turned around even after they were betrayed and still served. How'd they do that? They did that because they loved them. And sure enough, that's the command that Jesus will close out with, to love and to serve. There's a painting from the mid-1800s by Ford Madox Brown, and it's titled Jesus Washing Peter's Feet. This is a classic piece of religious art. Jesus, of course, is right in the center, and it's a holy moment. He's got the halo over his head, but his head is bowed low. It's so humbling of Jesus to be doing this. The disciples in the background are just shocked. One disciple is comforting another. Do you see that in the middle of the background there? He's comforting another. One toward the left, he's got his head in his hands like going, Jesus, what are you doing? The master doesn't serve by washing feet. Are you kidding? He's got that kind of expression. And then there's that gentleman on the far left who's untying his sandals as if to say, I'm next, everyone. He wants to be next. And then there's that change purse there on the table in front of him. We know who that is. And Jesus will wash his feet. But that's all background stuff going on. This is a focus on Jesus and Peter. And look how angry Peter is. He could not protest this moment any more than he's doing. He is really frustrated in this moment. So much so, he's even fighting Jesus. Jesus has to hold the back of his heel to keep him from pulling back, withdrawing from this moment. No, you don't understand now what's happening, but you'll understand later, he tells Peter. You'll get this one day. That Jesus had to serve this way. And then he turns around and he tells us, you will be blessed if you do this too. Really? Then I'm supposed to go out and just serve somebody who, maybe even someone who's betrayed me? Can I even pull that off? So often when we read the story of Jesus, we too often read that we are Jesus in the story. It's just... you're reading about the gospel of Jesus, and all of a sudden you just run off and you go, wow, Jesus and I are so much alike. You know what? If in your reading you ever get to that point, you've read it wrong. Are you hearing me? I'm not like him. And it just makes me wag my head. This is one of the moments, by the way, this story is just another moment where this gives me proof that men didn't write this story. I know critics love to point out that all the Bible is just written by men. It's just made up by men. Really? If you were making up a story about a God, would you make up a story like that? Or would your story have a God who's carried in on a throne and who has a massive throne and who has all authority and all power, and he uses that authority and power to keep people in line. Wouldn't that be the story you write? It's a story Hollywood always writes when they write a story about a God. But in this book, this is why it's got to be right, because in this story, God, who makes humanity, turns around and allows that humanity to betray him. And so, because they were disobedient, God decides to come down to humanity as a man. And while he's here, he serves humanity, and then he dies on a cross for it. He allows the humanity he created to kill him. Does this sound like a story made up by men? Is that the kind of story a man would make up? No. It's stories like this of Jesus washing feet that just gives more credibility that this is not a story made up by men. This is what happened. This is a God story. But what this is meant to do is to be a snapshot of love. How can we serve our betrayers? We do it because we love them. So we were in Yellowstone. We were a young family. I wanted to climb my first mountain. It was my first mountain. I've climbed many since then, but it was my first mountain. The highest point in Yellowstone, there was a fire tower up there, and I wanted to go up there and see it. And I'd made arrangements with Bonnie to drop me off at the trail. She and the kids were going to go find lunch and do some other things and then come back later, give me enough time to climb this mountain. I had a backpack that had enough water for me and some power bars for me. And when we got to the trail and was dropping me off, my 9-year-old daughter, Stephanie, started begging to go. And I said, Stephanie, I didn't bring enough supplies for us both. And she just kept begging. I said, the trail, this journey is hard, Stephanie. Daddy might not even make it. And I was just struggling with, and finally, Bonnie said, I think you should take her. I was like, oh my goodness, we're probably not going to make it now. We hit the trail together, and sure enough, real early on the trail, she required hydration. That meant I went without. Early on the trail, she required some nourishment, and that meant I went without. On the trail, it got real hot real fast, and I had to I removed my shirt. I was much younger then, so don't imagine it today, but back then I was much younger. And I took off my shirt, tied it around her head to protect her from the sun, and then it got too steep, and she couldn't climb. And I took my belt and I tied it to the belt loop behind so it hung like a tail, and she just hung on to it, and I just dragged her up the mountain like that there, and we made it. We made it to the top, the two of us, and it was just one of those special moments between a dad and I tell you that not to make myself some amazing dad. This was a good moment for me as a father. I got lots of failed moments, but this moment was good. I took the heat for my daughter. I took the thirst for my daughter. I took the burden for my daughter. I took the load for my daughter. I took the hunger for my daughter. Why would I do all that? Because I love my daughter. This room is full of parents who have done unbelievable acts of service for their kids. Why would they do that? Kids who have even hurt them. Why? Because we love them. Why would Jesus ask us to serve in such a nasty way? The foot washing, he's not asking you to wash people's feet. It's the heart of service that when you leave here today, there's going to be a moment that's going to be just yours. Do you understand that now? Every time we dive into a passage, something that week is going to happen, and it's going to happen here. You're going to be out somewhere, and there's going to be a moment that is ordained by God just for you, and the timing has been ordained by God to be that time. And there will be a moment for you to serve someone else. Maybe you're not even friends with, maybe you don't even like them, but there will be a moment to serve that will be just yours. And if you and I don't do it in that moment of service will go undone and it will slip away. It's a moment that God has a divine appointment for just you and I to be at the right place at the right time to serve someone. And in that moment when you and I are thinking, I couldn't serve my betrayer, yes, you can. Because all those people in the Old Testament who did amazing moments of service, it wasn't their ability to do it. It was the Spirit of God in them and the power of the Father with them. That's how they did it. Not them on their own ability. We can do this because it won't be just us doing it. It will be the Holy Spirit in us and the accompaniment of God with us that will help us do something that's just going to be unthinkable. And Jesus says, if you do this, you will be blessed. One day when you and I are on our deathbed and we're assessing life, this is heavy, I know, but it won't be the power or the money or the prestige that will mean the most to you. In that moment, you'll suddenly realize that was a trap, that was just an illusion. I'm not saying to the young people it's not important to be successful. I'm just saying it won't be the most important thing. On your deathbed, you want to know what will be most important to you? Who you loved and who loved you. That will be the most important thing. And it will be a moment when you'll realize if you had an impact in people's lives or if you just walked this world in vain, seeking your own interest. Don't you listen to voices out there that tell you it's too late in this world, or that this world is too far gone, or they've gone too far. Don't you listen to those voices that tell you that you're wasting your time, or you're wasting your resources, or you're wasting your efforts. Don't you listen to those voices. Those are not voices that come out of heaven. God's voice says there's still time. There's still a chance to make an impact. There's still a chance to love. There's still a chance to serve. That's His voice, and you tune into that voice. Just hours before the cross, and Jesus does not ask His disciples to be more committed or to be more zealous or to be more bold. That's not what He asks. Just hours before the cross, Jesus says, I need you to love and serve. And I think we can do this.